Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Framed. This is a brand new BookTube event. I'll try to leave a list to all the perpetrators down below that is designed to throw a spotlight on art books, art writing, all the permutations of art of the visual arts that we don't ordinarily talk about on BookTube. I'm always a big fan of BookTube events like this, whether it's Summer of Sport or Framed, and there are a few other candidates I could come up with, where we give a little attention to a kind of book that we don't always talk about, but that are, well, in the case of Summer of Sport or a couple of the other types of books that I have in mind, really popular. Of course, art books are not really popular, usually because art books are very expensive. They're usually oversized, ornate things that are pretty pricey, even more expensive than normal books. So this is a little bit of a rarefied event, but I love it. And the Framed as an event actually has a couple of prompts. Of course, the ongoing prompt for the month is to read a book about art, somehow about art, some way about art. And then prompt number 2 is to take in some art. Go to a museum, or as I was told, walk around and look at the architectural art on your walk in your neighborhood. There are all sorts of things that you can do, even your own art in your house. One of you made a suggestion that is really working its way in my mind. That I do a tour of the artwork here at Hyde Cottage. It was a great idea. I get all my best ideas from the losers who watch my channel, who are loser enough to watch such a boring, incomprehensible channel. One of you suggested, why don't you put your phone on that little handheld tripod? You say that it's not a tripod anymore, it's just biped because you broke one of the legs, but you can still hold it like that. Why don't you put your phone on a tripod and show us the artwork on the walls at Hyde Cottage? Because I couldn't do without that. When I have a new living space, I hang pictures on the walls. I just don't feel that the space is complete without that. And I'm always on the lookout for new art to find and hang on the walls. I thought about that. That might still be possible. But in the meantime, I'm taking another suggestion from another viewer of this channel, which is that I tour you through some of my art books. This was also suggested by a video by Greg and another Bibliophile Reads, who is one of the hosts of Framed. So I thought we'd do that this time around, because once again, the books that I've selected show you the variety of art books that can be out there. Art books do a whole bunch of different things. Like, for instance, this first one is a good example of, we would have to call it an art book, which is an illustration of a prose book, where the illustrations become the point. In this case, this is the illustrated Bible. Story by story illustrated Bible. This is from the folks at DK, of course. And it is just all the stories of the Old and New Testament illustrated. And one of the reasons why this comes to my mind as art is because biblical stories have, for 2,000 years, been a primary source of artwork for artists. So this came to my mind for that, even though you don't even, here, let me get back to here. You don't even have to, I mean, the most famous example is the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo's ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which if you've only seen visual representations of it, the reality will blow you away. But also just books themselves can be made into art. That is just incredible. That's not actually, aside from this drop letter up here, this is not actually an illustration of anything, but it's still a work of art. So this is one way. This is one thing from my collection. I go back to this thing quite often. It's actually got a lot of prose in it that's really good, but as an illustrated Bible, oh, I just love it. I have a couple of illustrated Bibles. That's one thing, would be to take a book and illustrate it so heavily that your book becomes an art book. But another way to do it might be to do a whole book, dedicate a whole book to a subject for which there is no pictorial representation. So you're going to need art in order to bring that subject to life. And this is what I mean by that. In this case, this is Life Before Man. This is an old popular science, oversized hardcover about all the epochs of life on Earth before humans. We get humans at the very end here. We get our earliest cousins and ancestors at the very end of the book. But most of the book is pictorial representations of creatures that lived, thrived, died, reproduced, had birth defects, endured hurricanes, millions and millions of years of that life, year after year after year, eventually went extinct. All long before there were even mammals, much less primates, much less humans. Just, these are wonderful pictures, reconstructions from fossil remains of a lot of these creatures. And you need to do that. You need a book like this. Look at that. Look at the detail there. You need a book like this in order to illustrate this subject because, of course, these things are long gone. I love how the artist here does the best job possible from what was known at the time. I think this came out about 100 years ago. They do the best job to convey what was known at the time, not only about the animals, but about what kinds of things would be in the background. You won't have like fir trees in the background here because they didn't exist yet. They'll be very careful delineation of whether or not there's grass in a picture because we know when grass evolved. And if you're dealing with an animal that lived before grass, you don't want to put it in your picture. When did this come out? This isn't about 100 years ago. I think I'm off by half a century. Yeah, 1972. Okay, so this is 50 years ago. And you know, our knowledge of these fossil creatures and whatnot and these previous epochs has grown by leaps and bounds since then. But these pictures still make this an art book. I mean, the pictures are half the reason why you would look at it anyway, right? Well, apart from the scientific information. Then another famous way to look at an artist would be look at art in a book would be to look at one artist, tour through one artist's work and life. Usually, these books are put together as a companion to a museum exhibit. So they'll be big, they'll be ornate, they'll be expensive, and they will take you through. The book will be your keepsake of the exhibit that you can't keep. There'll be lots of prose in these books. There'll be an extensive, usually complete visual catalog from these artists, and it will be just a one-stop for the artist. And this is an example here. This is from Lawrence and Judy Cutler. This is their book on JC Leyendecker. The illustrator JC Leyendecker famously did illustrations like this from the early decades of the 20th century. Most of these are advertisements. They were advertisements from magazines, but they have since been incorporated into 1 million book covers. So his Leyendecker's style is familiar. One of the things that people might not realize about his style is not only who he's indebted to, but who's indebted to him. Let me show you an example of what I mean here. Leyendecker did a lot of work, for instance, as a cover artist for the Saturday Evening Post. These are some of his covers. This is one of his covers. Who does that remind you of? You might not know the name JC Leyendecker, but you certainly know the name Norman Rockwell, and that's exactly what this reminds you of. That's no accident. Rockwell copied everything about Leyendecker, everything about him, even his clothing style and his address. Rockwell did what we would now consider stalking to Leyendecker, patterned everything after this, and it was a success. And this book actually deals with that. You get these wonderful details of just a time gone by, of a century ago, when the world was different. You get little reproductions of lots of covers and then highly detailed reproductions of parts of others. And as you're going through the book, as I went through this book originally, when did this come out? I wrote about this book. I reviewed it extensively. I give it a nice long review back in 2008. One of the details that runs throughout here is something that you will intuit. If you know nothing about JC Leyendecker, you will still intuit something by the time you get done with this book. You see enough details like this, or this. Can practically go at random. Or this. You see enough details as you're going through this book, especially when the details are highlighted for you, and you start to realize what team JC Leyendecker played for. And the amazing thing about his early artwork for the advertising world is that he was showing you that without you being aware of it. He was putting it right in your face and you were a heterosexual male college student, and you were buying what he was selling without even realizing the subliminal message he was putting in there. See, so he'd give us very glamorous pictures like this. But I want to see if I want to get an example of what I'm talking about. Yes. Okay. All right. This is an ad. I believe this is for Arrow collar. Yes. Once upon a time, in eons past, if you're young, you might not know this. You washed your shirt, but you didn't wash your collar. Your collar was separate. You could detach it. And since when you had a suit coat on, the collar was the only thing, the main thing people were seeing. Your collar could look clean, even if your shirt wasn't exactly clean. If you hadn't laundered your shirt in quite some time, of course, you didn't have a laundry machine in your home. It was a big deal to do. So, but if you changed your collar, it could make you look nice and fresh, even though you weren't. And so collar companies that sold just collars were a huge deal. And Arrow collar was the most successful of them all. And JC Leyendecker was their most successful artist. He did full color artwork for them at a very good rate of pay for a long time. And his pictures were always, I'm going to show you, you're a young man, you're vain, you're a man of the world, you want to invest in a collar company. I'm going to draw a scene where collars will be a part of it, but a lot else will be, a scene in which you can put yourself. Clothing companies still do that. They will give you a scene. Rather than just point an arrow at their product, they will put their product in a scene so that you can imagine yourself using it. And JC Leyendecker, every time he did an advertisement for Arrow collars, it is also an advertisement for something else. It couldn't be any clearer. Look at that is an Arrow collar advertisement done by JC Leyendecker. What is that picture about? What is happening in that picture? Now, to our modern sensibilities, it could not be any clearer what point JC Leyendecker is trying to get at there. And it has nothing to do with shirt collars. And he did that over and over again. He would throw just enough suspicion off with pictures like this. But he did it over and over again in illustrations, especially in his advertisements. I couldn't believe it when I was really pouring through this book. I couldn't believe it. Oh, there's also this. In that election, I trust we know which of these two gentlemen we are going with. I trust I don't need to say which is preferable. Okay? But anyway, let me get you just one other example. Yes, here we go. It's another Arrow collar advertisement. Okay. All right. So this is another way that you could do an art book. Is this to hunker down on one artist and show their life and times. There's a lot of prose in this book. You're not seeing a lot of it, but there's a lot of prose in this book. Plus, yes. He certainly seems interested, doesn't he? There's a lot of prose in this book. It's a careful catalog and also a biography of Leyendecker. So that's a way that you can do that. But another art book thing that you can do is just to collect the pictures. Maybe you have an introduction that has 5 pages of a biographical sketch of the artist, but it's mostly just that you're collecting the pictures. That's a very popular thing to do. I have a lot of books like that. I want to show you just 2. One is this great old collection of the drawings of Gustav Klimt, who, again, like Leyendecker, you may know some of his work. You'll certainly know the tone of it. Even though you might not know it by name, you'll know it because it's co-opted in a lot of books. Book covers, especially, they'll have a lot of stuff like that. It's difficult, for instance, it's difficult to avoid his engravings for Dante's Divine Comedy. It's difficult to avoid them. Also, all of the pictures that he did for the Bible are incredibly popular. And also lots of other things. He did Don Quixote, he did Orlando Furioso, he did The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Pretty much anything that he could turn his hand to doing one of these huge engravings for. His engravings were just gigantic. I want to get you perhaps his most reprinted thing. This has everything. This book has everything. The Crusades, Dickens, Paradise Lost. This has everything. But I want to show you Edgar Allan Poe. I'd forgotten about that. And Tennyson. Here we go. Okay. He also very famously did the Bible. And this will have his engravings from the Bible. Yeah, there we go. Let there be light. And you will see this or some variation on this, one of his Bible pictures in many, many, many Bibles. I love his work. I think it's amazingly good. This particular book is my favorite of all the Dore books that are out there, or that were out there, in that it gives you the text involved as well. So if Dore is illustrating something from Tennyson, it will give you the whole of the poem. For some reason, I really like that. That really adds to the book. And then we will do another book that's just dedicated to the art of the artist, without really anything in the way of... Well, the Dore thing has text, but it's the text that he's adapting. It's not much about him. There's an introduction here about his life, but barely anything. And some books don't give you anything at all. They just give you the artwork. And that is almost always true of my beloved New Yorker cartoons. The New Yorker magazine has had cartoons for almost a full century now. Next year they have their centenary, and the cartoons have taken on a life of their own. They've always been the most popular thing in the magazine, and I love them. They've been collected a million different times. I think they are amazing. I think they are a prototypical meme set of a most encompassing kind. You can find a New Yorker cartoon to speak to almost anything before the age of social media. I love them, and I also love their individual artists, the individual artists who've done their work. And my favorite of those is Helen Hokinson. And she was popular in her time. She would have done artwork for a lot longer, but she died in a plane crash. But the New Yorker has a number of different Helen Hokinson books. My favorite is My Best Girls. I have this battered hardcover, but I get this whenever I can because I go through it so often that I tear it apart. I've written about Helen Hokinson as well, and a piece that I really like. I don't know if it's still findable online. I'll do my best to find it. My Best Girls is a reference to the particular ladies in Helen Hokinson cartoons. She did a lot of cartoons about a whole bunch of different things, but her favorite thing to do over and over again were these Juno-esque, overfed, overpampered, overprivileged, overmoneyed, completely innocent ladies from Larchmont or Rochester or Scarsdale, or they are ingenues in the city. They are innocents in the city, and they come out with the funniest little malapropisms. And it's a very evanescent kind of humor. You no sooner look at it than it vanishes under its own weight. It's nothing. It's the tiniest little thread of humor, but I love it. And nobody did it better than Helen Hokinson, where her best girls are always saying the wrong thing in the right way. They are so lovable. They all look the same. They all have these huge fluted hats and huge busts with the floral arrangements and whatnot. They usually have tiny henpecked husbands, and we catch them in their silliest moments. And you can't laugh at them. You have to laugh with them. Here we have one of My Best Girls on a train talking to a conductor. What does she say? Does this ticket entitle me to a hangover in Philadelphia? You know what she means. But it's not what she says. Let's see here. You know the meaning every time. Yes, here we are. Greeting for lunch. See what I mean? They are all well endowed. They are all plump and happy. They all have the happy, ridiculous hats on them. And this one, the caption is "Hello, badminton champion," because you can just imagine the tiny little event they've just had. Let me see if I can find you another one. Oh, all of these are so good though. They're all just so wonderful. Usually it's the henpecked husband is a key here. Oh my God, I love all of these so much. Let me find one that some of them, in fact, a lot of them are pretty contextualized. So I'm trying to find one that, well, Well, this is actually my own sentiment when I go to a modern art museum. There they are, these two ladies. Helen Hokinson's ladies are not meant to look at modern art. The caption is, well, I don't think he's even trying. And so on and so forth. I don't want to... oh, yes, well, here's another one. Amateur theatricals are a big thing with Helen Hokinson's best girls because they're always doing them wrong. They're always slightly clueless. Here we have a group of people that are obviously doing an amateur theatrical something or other, and the caption is, "Well, if I'm not Madame Lupesca, who am I? if I'm not Magda Lupesca, who am I?" This is also the Helen Hokinson is also the New Yorker cartoonist who's done some lines that I just use all the time. Especially during my flirtation with gardening. She has two classic cartoons with her clueless ladies about gardening, where one of them goes back to the garden shop and says, "Well, I put them in the dirt last November, and that's the last I've seen of them." And another one, my favorite one, is one of my best girls saying that the particular kind of purchase at a garden shop would only be best if it doesn't involve too much stooping. These are the ladies who get into a cab on Fifth Avenue and say, "Drive like mad," or have all sorts of adventures when their husbands aren't looking. They spend their husband's money way too much, and they're irresistible. This is nothing about Helen Hokinson. This is just about her girls. That's all. It's just. This is one of her girls is dressing with the hope of her handmaiden, and the caption is, "I hope this isn't going to emphasize anything." I could spend forever I have like 5 Helen Hokinson collections. I could spend forever in them. There has been no complete collected thing. There has been no version of this for Helen Hokinson, and that's a shame. I don't think that conditions that books like this thing exist for many New Yorker cartoonists, unless they do them themselves. She never had a chance to do it herself. But anyway, that's another thing. It's just the artwork itself, and that is yet another way to do an art book. So those are a few more of the art books that I have for framed. I don't want to go on too long. I could do this. We should do this again. I should pull down some more of my art books and go through them and talk about them a bit. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up at long last. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.